We don't want an emperor. Our countries are sovereign. If Trump issues tariffs, other countries have the right to do the same.
Donald Trump is panicking. And this time, it's not because of China, it's Brazil. More specifically, it's President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. The man who once sat behind bars is now standing at the front lines of a global rebellion. And he's not backing down. While most world leaders tiptoe around Trump, Lula is doing the unthinkable, calling him out, daring him to retaliate, and leading a bold charge against U.S. dominance.
But President Lula is no shrinking violet. He's a longtime heavyweight of global politics, and he told me he would not take this lying down.
In just the past few days, Lula launched his most direct strike yet. Not with weapons, but with words and policies. He's pushing de-dollarization harder than any other world leader. While China and Russia stay quiet and strategic, Lula is loud, clear, and unapologetic. He's saying what others only whisper. And Trump can't stand it. Even worse for Trump, Lula isn't standing alone. He's rallying BRICS, uniting the global South, and giving voice to a movement that's ready to ditch the dollar. And this time, the world is actually listening. Trump tried to send warnings. Washington tried to apply pressure. But Lula fired back, hard. His message was unmistakable. No U.S. president can tell me what to do. That's not just defiance. That's a direct challenge to American power. And now Trump is threatening a massive 50% tariff on Brazil. The U.S. media might be quiet, but behind closed doors, Washington is panicking. Trump knows what's at stake. If Lula succeeds, it could trigger a domino effect, one that ends the dollar's global reign once and for all. Before we dive into the details, hit that subscribe button, because no one breaks it down like we do. Now let's get into it. On July 9th, President Donald Trump announced sweeping 50% tariffs on all Brazilian imports, set to begin August 1st. The move isn't just economic. It's a political strike aimed at silencing President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva and undermining his campaign against U.S. dollar dominance. But Lula fired back, reminding the world that Trump doesn't rule over Brazil.
President Trump forgetting that he was elected to govern the U.S. He was elected not to be the emperor of the world.
In his announcement, Trump repeatedly tied the tariffs to the prosecution of former President Jair Bolsonaro, now facing trial in Brazil, and accused the judiciary of staging a witch hunt. His message was blunt: drop the charges or face economic retaliation. Brazil isn't a minor player. It's the largest economy in South America and ranks among the world's top 10, with a GDP of $2.3 trillion. Exports to the U.S. exceed $36 billion annually, spanning coffee, soybeans, oil, orange juice, beef, iron ore, lumber, machinery, and Embraer aircraft. Targeting these industries with such steep tariffs would send shockwaves through both economies. Take coffee. The U.S. buys nearly 17% of Brazil's coffee exports. Industry experts warn that higher costs will hit consumers or push buyers toward other suppliers. Orange juice is even more exposed. The U.S. imports about 42% of Brazil's output. In aviation, Embraer, the world's third-largest aircraft maker, relies on North America for up to 75% of its revenue. Its stock plunged 8% after Trump's announcement. Reuters reports over 60% of Brazil's engine, machinery, and generator exports go to the U.S., along with 40% of lumber and 13% of crude oil. While about 28% of Brazilian exports are already headed to China and other markets, shifting supply chains won't happen overnight. Economists predict the tariffs could cut Brazil's GDP by 0.3 to 0.4%, or $20 billion by 2026. And U.S. consumers won't escape the fallout. Prices for coffee, beef, orange juice, and construction lumber are likely to climb. Businesses dependent on Brazilian steel and aluminum would also suffer. Economists are already calling Trump's tariffs a hidden tax on American families. The offensive extends beyond goods. Trump has ordered a Section 301 investigation into Brazil's treatment of U.S. tech firms, part of his broader push to shield American giants from foreign digital regulations, placing Brazil alongside Canada, South Korea, and the EU on his watch list. Lula has stood firm. He condemned the tariffs as unacceptable blackmail, declaring, "No foreigner is going to tell this president what to do." In a televised address, he defended Brazil's judiciary and argued that trade must never be used to pressure domestic justice. He also noted that Brazil had already offered a trade deal to the US back in May and remains open to talks. In response, Brazil activated its new trade reciprocity law, allowing retaliatory tariffs and restrictions on US tech firms. A special business committee was formed to revise commercial policy and prepare countermeasures. Treasury officials say Brazil could eventually redirect more than half of its US-bound exports elsewhere. But that transition will take time. At home, the tariffs have unified Brazil's political spectrum. Mass protests erupted in major cities. Effigies of Trump and Bolsonaro were burned as demonstrators accused Trump of meddling in Brazilian sovereignty. Even some Bolsonaro supporters expressed frustration, saying Trump's actions may have backfired, boosting Lula's popularity instead. Recent polls show a noticeable uptick in Lula's approval ratings. Despite the turmoil, Brazil's economy remains resilient. Reuters projects 2.2% growth for 2025, though inflation may rise to 5.2%. Analysts believe normal trade will continue, but uncertainty may weigh on Brazil's central bank and energy sector. Trump's tactic is blunt: use tariffs to bend Brazil to his agenda, including dropping charges against Bolsonaro. Lula's response is just as forceful: Brazil won't yield. And if needed, it's ready to deepen ties with China and other BRICS partners to push back. But this is a lot bigger than Brazil. It is a global movement against the US. Under Lula's leadership, Brazil has taken an active role in BRICS, the group of countries trying to reduce US control over the global economy. Lula called for a new common currency for trade among BRICS countries. He questioned why every country in the world still relies on the dollar for international trade. His exact words were, "Why can't we trade using our own currencies? Who decided the dollar was king?" These were not random comments. They were a clear message to the US and especially to Trump. The BRICS nations now make up over 40% of the world's population and more than a quarter of global GDP. They have more oil, more resources, and more people than the G7. If they succeed in moving away from the dollar, the entire US financial system could be in danger. Lula is helping lead that effort, and Trump knows it. For decades, the US dollar has been the center of world trade. Oil is priced in dollars. Loans from the IMF and World Bank are in dollars. Countries keep their reserves in dollars. This gives the US incredible power. It can punish countries with sanctions, control global finance, and print money without fear. Lula is challenging all of this. In a move that shocked Washington, he supported Russia's idea of a BRICS financial system, completely separate from the US and the SWIFT banking network. Lula even suggested using blockchain-based payment systems, which is a major break from traditional banking. Trump, who once mocked BRICS as a weak group, now sees Lula as a serious problem. Lula is showing other countries that it's possible to break away from the dollar and survive. And that kind of example is what terrifies the US the most. Lula is not just talking, he is acting. First, Brazil has jump-started currency swap deals with China, officially allowing Brazilian exporters and Chinese buyers to settle trade directly in reais and yuan, rather than converting through US dollars. These deals have already facilitated pulp and agricultural exports priced in local currencies and cut out the middleman entirely. That is concrete proof of trade without the dollar. But there are risks too. Brazil's growing reliance on China's financial infrastructure could create long-term vulnerabilities. If trade shifts too heavily toward the yuan, Brazil may end up trading one dependency for another, from Washington to Beijing. Analysts also warn that local currency trade exposes exporters to exchange rate volatility, especially if confidence in the real weakens. While de-dollarization offers more sovereignty, it also comes with new risks that Brazil will have to manage carefully. Second, Brazilian officials announced plans to issue panda bonds, which is Brazilian sovereign debt denominated in Chinese renminbi. This is more than financial symbolism. It signals Brazil's determination to use Chinese funding and reduce dependency on dollar-denominated borrowing. Also, Brazil's central bank has increased the share of yuan in its foreign reserves, making the yuan the second most important currency after the dollar. Reported figures show the yuan's share surpassed 5% by 2022, rising from almost zero before 2018. Brazil's financial institutions have joined China's alternative payment networks. Banco Bocom BBM became the first South American bank on the China-led SWIFT alternative, while ICBC is now the yuan settlement bank in Brazil, facilitating transactions between Brazilian and Chinese firms without using the US dollar or SWIFT. At the 2025 BRICS summit in Rio, Brazil vigorously supported the launch of BRICS Pay and pushed proposals to create a cross-border payment system within the bloc. Leaders agreed to work on a technical roadmap to build infrastructure that allows direct settlement in local currencies and reduces dependency on financial systems controlled by the US. This movement represents clear institutional commitment beyond rhetoric. Trump's approach has taken a sharp turn. His advisors have told him that Lula's growing popularity in the global South could create a movement against the dollar and against US control in general. Trump, who once joked about nobody using pesos or rubles, is now talking about keeping the dollar strong as a national security issue. Trump sees this and knows the danger. If other Latin American countries follow Brazil's lead, the US could lose control over trade in its own backyard. For the first time, Washington's economic empire faces a serious threat, and Lula is the man leading it. The most recent G20 summit in Rio de Janeiro became a political battleground. Trump didn't attend, but he made sure to criticize Lula's hosting of Russian and Chinese delegates. Lula responded publicly, saying, "Brazil will not be anyone's servant." That line was a direct challenge to Trump. Lula was making it clear that he doesn't accept US orders. He allowed Russia's foreign minister to speak freely at the G20, despite the war in Ukraine. He also gave space for China's representatives to push for global currency reform. Trump's team attacked Lula in the media, calling him soft on dictators. But the world saw something different. A global South leader standing up to US bullying and winning support. Even India and Indonesia praised Lula's leadership. So what can the US do if Lula is refusing to be intimidated? Well, they bring out their tools of economic control, which are the IMF and World Bank. Lula has accused these institutions of keeping poor countries in debt and forcing them to obey US policy. At a recent summit in Brasilia, Lula said, "We cannot keep being ruled by those who colonized us." This statement was explosive. Trump's economic allies quickly responded, warning that Brazil could lose US investment. But Lula didn't back down. Instead, he announced that Brazil would increase its participation in the BRICS Development Bank and reduce borrowing from the IMF. The threat to US financial power is not just economic, it is political. Lula is showing the world that rejecting US pressure can actually improve a country's position. And this is the type of message that Washington, especially under Trump, wants to silence. In Latin America, Africa, and Southeast Asia, his interviews and speeches are gaining popularity. His criticism of US foreign policy, from wars to sanctions, is being widely shared. He's not seen as a radical. He is seen as a rebel against a broken system. This is dangerous for Trump. Lula is not just another politician. He is becoming a symbol, a rallying point for countries tired of being pushed around by US power. Trump knows that symbols can be more dangerous than armies. Trump's business allies are beginning to panic. Major US companies that rely on dollar trade are warning that a large-scale move to alternative currencies could hurt exports and raise costs. Wall Street analysts are starting to talk about the Lula risk, a new term for the danger of global dollar rejection. Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan both warn the dollar's share of global reserves is shrinking faster than expected. Nations like Saudi Arabia, Nigeria, and Indonesia are already moving to diversify. And Lula's push for a BRICS currency? It's accelerating that shift. The world is no longer just watching. It's moving. And Lula isn't just part of the movement. He's leading it. So the question is, will Lula's challenge spark a new financial order? Or provoke a global showdown with the US? If you're following the future of global power, make sure you're subscribed. More explosive updates are coming. We'll see you in the next one.